And please tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I would love to interact with you legends. Now to the story. The first time I saw her profile, I remember thinking she looked like someone who had her life figured out. Her photos were the usual mirror selfies or over-filtered vacation pics. She had one where she was painting something on a big canvas, another at a farmer's market with sunflowers in her hand, and one where she was sitting in a cafe with this unreadable half-smile that made her look like she knew something I didn't. Her bio just said, "Trying to find a reason to delete this app." It worked. I swiped right instantly, and when it matched, I swear my heart did that stupid skip thing like I was 15 again. We started talking that same night. Her texts had this rhythm to them. Effortless, like she wasn't trying too hard but somehow always knew what to say. We talked about food, music, travel, random stuff. She told me she loved road trips, hated olives, and that she used to do pottery but gave it up when life got too busy. She said she missed doing things that made her feel grounded. I told her I'd never done pottery before, but I'd totally tried it. She replied, "Careful, I might hold you to that." Our first date was one of those rare ones that go exactly how you hope. We met at a small wine bar tucked between two old brick buildings downtown. She wore this cream sweater and jeans, nothing flashy, but she still turned heads. I remember thinking she smelled like vanilla and something else I couldn't name. We talked for hours, barely noticing the place closing. She laughed a lot, especially when I told her about the time I accidentally joined a mom's book club on Meetup because I misread the description. By the end of the night, I was hooked. The next few weeks were a blur of perfect dates. We did brunch at this cafe that had lemon pancakes the size of your face, went to a drive-in movie, even did a pottery class together. Every time I was with her, it felt like I was living inside some kind of secret little world where nothing else mattered. She'd tell me these random stories about her childhood, about growing up near the ocean, about sneaking into concerts with her friends. She had this way of talking like she was painting with her words, messy, colorful, and full of small details that made you listen harder. It wasn't until the fifth date that things got weird. We were at her place for the first time. She'd invited me over for dinner, said she wanted to cook. Her apartment was cozy, with plants on every surface and a bookshelf overflowing with novels and art magazines. Everything smelled like cinnamon. I remember looking around and thinking, yeah, this feels like her. But then I noticed something small, a pair of men's sneakers by the door. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe a roommate or a brother or something. But later, when I went to grab something from the counter, I saw two mugs sitting there with Mr. and Mrs. written on them. That's when my brain kind of stopped. I didn't say anything right away. She was stirring pasta sauce, humming some song I didn't know, but I couldn't stop thinking about those mugs. After dinner, when we were sitting on the couch, I finally asked her straight up if she lived alone. She froze for a second, looked down at her hands, then took this deep breath like she was about to confess to a crime. She told me she still lived with her ex. Then she corrected herself, her husband. Apparently, they weren't officially divorced. She said they'd been separated for a while, but still shared the house because the market was too expensive to move out. She said he didn't know she was on Tinder. I remember just staring at her, trying to make sense of it. All those perfect moments we had, all little things that felt real. It suddenly felt like I was standing in the middle of a movie set and someone had yelled, "Cut." She kept talking, saying it wasn't what it sounded like, that they were just coexisting, that she hadn't been happy in years and she was just trying to feel like herself again. I wanted to believe her, but something about it didn't sit right. I asked if he was ever around when I came over, and she said no, that he worked nights and sometimes stayed with friends. The way she said it made it sound like she rehearsed it. After that, things started feeling off. She got harder to reach, slower to text back. She'd cancel plans last minute, saying something had come up. One time she told me she couldn't make it because her roommate was having people over, and I just stared at my phone, not even sure if I wanted to call her out on it. I didn't. I just said okay. A week later, I decided I needed answers. I drove to her place unannounced one evening. Probably not my smartest move, but I couldn't keep guessing. Her car was there, and the lights were on. I knocked. No answer. Then a guy opened the door. He looked around my age, maybe a bit older. He asked who I was. My brain kind of short-circuited, so I said I was a friend of Mariana's. He looked confused, then said she wasn't home, that she was out with friends. He introduced himself. His last name was the same one on the mail stacked by the door. I just nodded and left. I didn't even say anything else. I got in my car and sat there for a while, trying to process it. I wanted to be mad, but mostly I just felt stupid. Not because I liked her, but because I believed in this version of her that maybe never really existed. She texted me later that night saying she was sorry, that she hadn't meant to hurt me, that she just wasn't ready to explain everything yet. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't want to, but because I knew if I did, I'd end up right back where I started, hoping she'd tell me something real. I still think about her sometimes when I drive past that wine bar. It's weird how someone can be in your life for such a short time, but still leave a mark that feels like it's been there forever. She wasn't evil or manipulative. She was just complicated, and maybe that's worse because it makes it harder to hate her. I guess that's the thing about people. You never really know the story they're living until you find yourself written into a chapter you weren't supposed to be in. It started because I was bored on a Sunday afternoon. I'd just done laundry, my fridge was empty, and I was half watching some dumb cooking show where they make fancy desserts no one actually eats. I opened Tinder without even thinking about it, scrolling like it was muscle memory. Most profiles were the usual gym selfies, blurry group pics, bios that said things like, "Don't waste my time," or 6 foot because apparently that matters. Then there was Jesty. His profile looked like he actually tried, but not in that over-the-top way. He had a photo with his dog, one of him at a bookshop, and another in front of the street mural that said, "Be kind, rewind." His bio said, "Curious about people and what makes them tick." At the time, that just sounded like someone who liked deep conversations. I didn't know how literal he meant it. When we matched, I didn't think much of it. He messaged me first, something about how my playlist screenshot in my profile had the same band he'd read about in some sociology book. We started talking about music, then about movies, then about random social stuff. He had this calm, thoughtful way of talking, like every message had a point, but didn't feel forced. We ended up chatting for hours that night. It was easy, natural, like we already knew each other a little. Our first date was at a small ramen place near the university. I remember walking in and spotting him right away. Tall, messy hair, a hoodie under a jacket, the kind of look that says, "I didn't try too hard, but I still somehow look good." He smiled when he saw me, stood up, and gave this awkward wave like he wasn't sure if a hug was too soon. I thought it was cute. Dinner was fun. He talked about his job. He said he was working on a research project, something about human behavior and dating patterns. I didn't really get the details, but it sounded smart. He asked me what I liked about dating apps, what made me swipe right, how I decided who to message first. I thought he was just trying to make conversation, so I answered honestly. I told him I was on there because meeting people in real life felt impossible lately, that I wasn't looking for anything crazy serious, but also not just a hookup. He nodded like he understood completely. The thing was, he listened in this really focused way. Not the fake kind of listening where someone's just waiting for their turn to talk, but like he was actually studying every word. I figured that was just his personality. We went on a few more dates after that. Coffee, a walk by the lake, dinner at this weird Ethiopian place he said he'd always wanted to try. Every time I'd leave thinking he was one of the good ones. He never crossed boundaries, never made things uncomfortable. He remembered small details about stuff I'd said and would bring them up later, like how I mentioned my favorite cereal once, and then he showed up with a box of it when we met next. It was thoughtful in a way that almost felt unreal. Then one night, after about 3 weeks of seeing each other, he invited me to his place to watch a movie. I remember his apartment being kind of minimalist. A few posters, lots of books stacked everywhere, and this big whiteboard covered in notes. I didn't think much of it until I got closer. It wasn't math or random doodles. It was words and phrases connected with arrows. Things like eye contact duration, body language response, first impression strategy. I laughed and asked if it was something for his research. He smiled, but not in a way that made me feel better. He said, yeah, that was his little project. Then he said something that didn't fully hit me at first. He told me that meeting me had been really valuable data. It took a second to register. I asked what he meant, and he explained like it was the most normal thing in the world that he'd been interviewing women from dating apps for his thesis. Only he never told them that's what he was doing. He said he wanted natural reactions, so he'd been using Tinder as a field study. I remember sitting there frozen, trying to process that he basically lied about everything just to observe people. He went on talking like he was proud of it, saying he'd learned so much about how people present themselves, how they respond to compliments, how long it takes before they share something personal. He even mentioned tracking emotional responses through text messages. He had screenshots, notes, even recorded details about how people's tone changed over time. That's when I realized I wasn't a person in his life. I was a piece of his research paper. I got up and said I had to go. He didn't try to stop me. He just said, "Don't take it personally. You've been one of the most interesting participants." That word, participants, stuck with me the whole drive home. I felt sick. Every memory suddenly looked different in my head. Every question he asked, every compliment, every thoughtful thing, it all had this hidden purpose behind it. He wasn't dating me. He was studying me. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I tried to see if he posted anything online about it. I found his LinkedIn, and sure enough, it mentioned he was doing a master's in sociology with a focus on digital dating interactions. There wasn't much else, but it was enough to confirm it. I thought about reporting him to the school or something, but I didn't even know what I'd say. Hey, this guy tricked me into going on dates so he could write notes about how I react to noodles and compliments. It sounded insane. A week later, he texted me asking how I'd been. I ignored it. Then he messaged again, saying he'd love to debrief if I was open to it. That word made me laugh out loud, like I was part of some social experiment that just ended. I blocked him after that. A couple months went by, and I read that his study actually got published in some small academic journal. Someone posted about it online, saying it was groundbreaking research on digital dating authenticity. I clicked on it, and even though there were no real names, some of the quotes sounded familiar. Too familiar. One of them was something I'd said word for word on our second date. I just sat there staring at the screen, realizing I'd become part of something I never agreed to. It didn't even make me angry anymore, it just made me feel small, like I'd been part of some weird social experiment and didn't even know it. Now, whenever someone asks what the weirdest Tinder story I have is, I never tell them about Jesse. I just say, "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." Because honestly, most people wouldn't. You can't really explain what it feels like to be studied by someone who pretended to care. It's not heartbreak, it's something colder than that. Like finding out you were a mirror the whole time, and the other person was only looking to see their own reflection. I wasn't even supposed to be on Tinder that week. I deleted it months ago after too many awkward first dates and one girl who brought her cousin just in case. But my friend convinced me to re-download it during a night of cheap beer and bad advice. I told him I'd give it 1 week. 1 week, then I was done. That's when I matched with Momo. She had this profile that didn't look like everyone else's. No fake captions, no looking for something real nonsense. Just 3 pictures. One of her laughing in a crowded market, one in a restaurant booth holding chopsticks, and one in a red jacket standing under neon lights somewhere downtown. Her bio said, "If you can make me laugh, I'll buy dessert." That line got me. I messaged her something dumb about how I was confident in my dessert game, but not my jokes. She replied right away with a laughing emoji and told me to prove it. Momo had this energy that pulled you in. Even over text, she made everything sound fun. She wasn't deep or mysterious, she was just easy to talk to. She said she liked guys who didn't take themselves too seriously, and I was like, great, that's me most of the time anyway. We talked about food a lot. She was obsessed with trying new restaurants, and she said she was working on a little project about different food spots around the city. Our first date was at a sushi place she picked. I showed up early and watched her walk in wearing a denim jacket, sneakers, and this huge smile like she already knew the night would go well. She was easygoing, teasing me about how I ordered the safe rolls while she went for the weird ones with sea urchin and quail egg. She said food was the best way to get to know someone, because how they eat says everything about who they are. I told her that made no sense, but she said it with so much confidence that it kind of did. We ended up talking for hours. When the bill came, I reached for it out of habit, but she stopped me and said, "Nah, this one's on me." I laughed and said I didn't mind splitting, but she insisted. She said, "You can get dessert next time." Next time came faster than I expected. She texted me the next day, sending a picture of a menu from a burger place she wanted to try. So we went. Same thing, great time, Easy conversation, her paying again. When I joked that I was starting to feel spoiled, she said, "I told you, I'm doing a little thing. You're helping more than you know." At that point, I figured she meant a food blog or something. A lot of people did that now. I didn't think it was weird. We kept going out maybe once or twice a week. She always picked the place. Sometimes fancy, sometimes weird hole-in-the-wall spots that didn't even take cards. And every time she paid. I offered over and over, but she always laughed and waved me off. Around the fourth date, I started to notice she always took pictures of the food, of the table, sometimes even of me, but never like normal photos. More like sneaky quick ones. Once, I caught her recording something while pretending to scroll her phone. I asked what she was doing, and she said she liked making memory clips. I didn't question it. Things started feeling a bit strange around our sixth date. We were at a tapas bar, and the waitress came over like she knew Momo. She said, "Back again already," and winked. I just laughed, thinking maybe Momo came there a lot. But after the waitress left, I noticed Momo looked a little tense, almost embarrassed. I asked if everything was cool, and she changed the subject fast. Later that night, when she went to the bathroom, I saw her phone light up. Her lock screen was a paused TikTok video. It showed a clip of her at the same restaurant with a caption that said, "When you tell him you want something serious, but he orders sparkling water." It had thousands of likes. I recognized the guy in the video. It wasn't me, but the table looked the same angle, same setup. That's when it hit me. When she came back, I didn't say anything right away. I didn't even know how to bring it up. She was smiling like nothing was wrong, asking if I wanted dessert. I said I needed to head out early. She looked disappointed, but didn't argue. That night, I went on TikTok and found her profile. It didn't take long. Her username had her name in it, and the videos were all about dating. Each one had captions like, "First date experiment." "He said he's 29 but acts 19. Or "How far will they go for free food?" The comments were full of people laughing, making jokes, calling her a genius. I kept scrolling and saw clip after clip of her on different dates, always with some guy across the table, always filled without them knowing. Then I found one that was me. The caption said, "He said he'd never been on a bad date before. Challenge accepted." I sat there staring at it, my face blurred but still obviously me. The comments were brutal. People making jokes, guessing what kind of guy I was. I felt sick. It wasn't even just embarrassment. It was this heavy, hollow feeling in my chest like I'd been tricked into being a joke. I texted her that night. I told her I'd seen the videos and asked if this was what she meant by her project. She replied with this long message saying it was a social experiment about modern dating and how men react to different situations. She said she wasn't trying to hurt anyone, that it was just content. She told me she thought I'd take it as a joke. I didn't reply. A few days later, one of my friends sent me her video again, saying, "Dude, isn't this you?" That's when I realized how far it had spread. I saw people stitching it, making jokes, analyzing every move I made in that 15-second clip. I deleted my Tinder the same night. Weeks later, she texted again. She said she felt bad about what happened, and that the video had been taken down after too many reports. She said she hoped I wasn't mad and that I'd helped her realize people take things too personally. That message made me more angry than the video did. Sometimes I still see her stuff pop up on my feed, even though I don't follow her. She's still doing her experiment, only now it's bigger. She's got sponsors, brand deals, all that. And yeah, sometimes I wonder if she ever thinks about the people she used for all of it, the ones who sat across from her, thinking they were getting to know someone real. I never told anyone what really happened, not even my friends. I just say I had a weird Tinder streak and leave it at that. Because how do you even explain that you went on a bunch of dates thinking you were connecting with someone, only to find out you were part of a video for strangers to laugh at? It's kind of funny in a messed up way. I started that week on Tinder just to kill boredom, and she turned me into entertainment. Guess we both got what we wanted in some way. You ever meet someone and right away, something just feels a little off, but you tell yourself you're being dramatic? Yeah, that was Timmy. From the jump, I had this small gut feeling he was going to be one of those guys who split hairs over everything. But I ignored it because he looked normal and had decent taste in music. His profile said he liked hiking, dogs, and making spontaneous decisions that somehow always work out. He seemed like one of those chill, go-with-the-flow types. Spoiler, He wasn't. We matched on a Tuesday night. He messaged me first, said something like, "You look like someone who complains about the quality of iced coffee." I laughed because it was true when we started talking. He was funny in this kind of dry, sarcastic way that made me think maybe we get along. He said he just moved into a new place with his friend, that he worked in construction management, and that he hated small talk. I liked that he didn't sound fake or overly polished. We decided to meet that weekend. He picked this diner about 20 minutes from my place. Said it was low-key, nothing fancy. That was fine with me. I'm not high maintenance about first dates. He showed up wearing a hoodie and jeans, smelled like some expensive cologne, and had a big goofy grin. He hugged me like we were old friends. The conversation was easy enough at first. Work, family, random stuff. He had this way of talking where he'd ask a question, but somehow it always circled back to him. I didn't mind much, though. I was just glad he wasn't one of those people who can't hold a conversation at all. We ordered burgers and fries, talked for like 2 hours. He made fun of my order for having too many add-ons. I made fun of him for eating his fries with mayonnaise. It was easy. When the bill came, I reached for my wallet out of habit. He stopped me and said, "Nah, we'll split." Cool, whatever. I didn't expect him to pay. It was fine. We each threw down our cards, and that was that. After dinner, he offered to drive me home since it had started raining and my car was parked a few blocks away. I thought that was nice of him, so I said sure. He dropped me off, we thought goodbye, and he said he'd text me later. I figured it went well. The next morning, I woke up to a Venmo notification. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Then I saw it, a request for $3.25. The note said, "Gas from last night." I stared at it for a full minute, thinking maybe it was a joke. It wasn't. He actually requested money for the gas he used to drive me home. It wasn't even out of his way. He'd literally gone 2 extra minutes. I texted him and said, "Hey, is this for real?" He replied almost instantly. He said something like, "Yeah, I just think it's fair. Gas isn't cheap these days." I didn't know whether to laugh or block him. I ended up just ignoring the request, thinking maybe he'd let it go. He didn't. The next day, he messaged again saying, "Hey, not sure if you saw a request. It's only $3. That's when I realized he was dead serious. I told my friend about it, and she laughed so hard she started crying. She said I should just pay it and never talk to him again. I thought about it, but something in me refused. It wasn't even about the money. It was about the principle. Who asked for gas money after a first date? A few days later, he texted again asking if I wanted to go out that weekend. I told him I didn't think it was a good idea. He said, "Wow, I guess people really don't like equality when it doesn't benefit them." That line made my jaw drop. I didn't even reply. A week passed, and I thought that was the end of it. Then I got another Venmo request. Same amount, same stupid smiley face. He'd sent it again. I didn't respond. He sent one more with a note that said, "Just trying to close the loop here." I blocked him on everything after that. You'd think that would be the end of it, but nope. About 2 weeks later, I ran into him again at the same diner of all places. I was there with a friend, and I saw him sitting at the counter, talking to another girl. Same hoodie, same stupid grin. I didn't want to make a scene, so I just pretended not to notice. But my friend saw the look on my face and whispered, "Is that the gas money guy?" I nodded. She nearly spit out her drink, trying not to laugh. After that, I couldn't stop wondering if he did that with everyone. Maybe he had a whole system where he calculated every cent he spent and made sure he got reimbursed. Like some kind of weird budgeting hobby. A couple weeks later, my friend sent me a screenshot from a local dating Facebook group. Someone had posted about a guy who Venmos girls after dates for gas money. The comments were full of people laughing, some saying they'd gone out with him too. Apparently, he even requested $1.50 from someone for half a soda he ordered for her. I just sat there reading through all the stories, realizing it wasn't just me. This guy had a pattern. It became kind of a running joke among my friends. Whenever we went out, someone would say, "Don't forget to Venmo her for breathing your air." I'd laugh, but deep down I was still annoyed that I'd even wasted a night on him. The weirdest part is that, aside from that whole gas thing, he wasn't terrible company. He was funny, had decent stories, seemed normal enough. That's what threw me off. He wasn't one of those obvious red flags. You had to actually go out with him to see the crazy. Months later, I was on another date with a different guy, and he brought up this gas money dude he'd heard about from his coworkers. I nearly choked on my drink. He said his friend had matched with him on Tinder, thinking he was cool until she found out his reputation. Apparently, people had started sharing screenshots of his Venmo requests as some kind of inside joke. That's when it clicked that I'd become part of some small urban legend about the cheapest guy in town. And honestly, I didn't even care anymore. It was almost funny at that point. Like, imagine being so petty that you turn into a cautionary tale. Sometimes I wonder if he ever realized how weird that was, or if he's still out there splitting every bill and calculating gas mileage like he's running an accounting firm. I kind of hope he is. It's weirdly fitting for him. Every now and then, I'll open Venmo and see that list of old transactions, and I can't help but laugh when I scroll past his name. It's like a little reminder that some people really do put a price on everything. $3.25 to be exact. I met Liddy on one of those random Wednesday nights when you open Tinder because you can't sleep and your brain feels too loud. I wasn't even planning to message anyone. I just wanted the distraction of swiping. Her profile caught me because it didn't look like she was trying too hard. Just 3 pictures. One at a park with her hair tied up, one of her holding a coffee cup with her hand half covering her face, and one blurry one at some kind of rooftop party. Her bio said, "I make good coffee and bad decisions." That line felt honest in a funny way, so I liked it. We matched the next morning, and she messaged me first. She said something dumb like, "You look like the kind of guy who texts with proper grammar, and I respect that." I laughed and said I try not to disappoint. From the start, the conversation felt smooth. She had this casual energy, funny, quick, and just the right amount of sarcastic. We talked about random stuff like favorite breakfast foods, weird childhood memories, and our favorite ways to waste time. We planned our first date at a small cafe downtown. When I walked in, she was already there sipping coffee and messing with her phone. She looked up, smiled, and said, "You actually showed up." That's how she was. Half joking, half serious all the time. We talked for hours that day. She told me she worked in event planning, as she liked indie movies, and that she had a cat named Mochi who apparently hated everyone except her. I remember thinking she was exactly my type, smart, funny, confident. After that, we saw each other a lot. Dinners, late night walks, spontaneous ice cream runs. It just worked. There wasn't any awkwardness, no weird pauses. We talk about everything from stupid TikTok trends to our families. She said her last relationship had been serious but ended because people grow in different directions. I didn't pry. It seemed like one of those polite ways of saying it didn't end well. About a month in, she invited me over to her place. She said she'd cook for me, which honestly sounded perfect. Her apartment was small, but really put together. Plants in every corner, soft lighting, music playing in the background. She made pasta, and it was actually good. I remember sitting there thinking, okay, maybe this one's real. After dinner, we were on the couch watching a show when her phone started blowing up. She glanced at it, ignored it, but it kept buzzing. She finally sighed, picked it up, and muttered something like, "Oh my God, not now." I asked if everything was okay, and she said, "Yeah, just my friend being dramatic." She turned her phone face down and changed the subject. The next day, I noticed she was quieter over text. Short replies, delayed responses. I didn't push it. Then that weekend she asked if I wanted to hang out, but instead of her place or mine, she wanted to go somewhere public, a park. We sat on a bench, and I could tell something was on her mind. She kept fidgeting with her hands. I finally asked if everything was fine, and that's when she dropped it. She told me I wasn't actually supposed to be on her radar. At first, I thought she meant it like, "You weren't my type, but I ended up liking you anyway." But then she explained. She said she had made a fake Tinder account. She didn't even use her real name at first. It was supposed to be this throwaway profile she made to test her fiancé. Yeah, fiancé. She found out he'd been acting shady, liking girls' pictures late at night, staying late at work too often. Her plan was to catfish him, see if he'd swipe right. But then Tinder recommended me to her, and she swiped out of curiosity. She said I seemed too normal, so she kept talking to me just to see what kind of guys were actually out there. And then, according to her, she started liking me for real. I just sat there staring at her, my brain trying to catch up. Every single date we had, every message, every late night conversation, it had all started as part of some test for another guy. And worse, there was still another guy in the picture. I asked her what she meant by fiancé. She said they were technically on a break, but still lived together. Apparently, she never told him about Tinder or about me. I remember feeling that the ground just shifted underneath me. She said she hadn't planned on telling me yet, but felt guilty because I was too nice to lie to. I didn't even know what to say. I just sat there staring at the lake in front of us while she kept talking about how messed up her situation was. She said she didn't love him anymore, that she just needed to know if he'd ever cheat. But the way she said it, it didn't sound like she was ready to leave him either. It sounded like she wanted to prove something. I told her I needed some time to think, and she nodded like she expected that. When I got home, I couldn't stop replaying everything in my head. The first date, the jokes, the nights we stayed up talking. It all felt fake now, like a movie set built on lies. The next morning, she texted saying she was sorry, that she understood if I never wanted to see her again. I didn't reply. I didn't even know what kind of reply would make sense. A few days later, I got a message from a random number. It was her fiancé. He said he found out everything. Apparently, he'd seen her messages or maybe even caught her on Tinder. He said, "I don't blame you. I just wish you hadn't been part of it." That hit me harder than I expected. I apologized, even though none of it had been my idea. He just said, "It's not your fault, man," and that was that. I never talked to Lydia again. She deleted her account not long after that, and I blocked her number. But the weird part is, sometimes when I think about it, I still remember how real it had felt. Not the lies, but the little things. The way she always hummed while cooking, the way she laughed when something actually caught her off guard. It's like my brain won't let go of the good parts, even though I know the whole thing was built on something fake. A few months later, I saw a post on a local Reddit thread about people using Tinder to test their partners. Someone mentioned a girl who made a fake account and accidentally started dating the wrong guy. I knew right away it was her. The story had details only she could have told. The comments were full of people arguing about who was in the wrong. Some said she was justified for testing him. Others said she was manipulative. I didn't bother commenting. There wasn't anything left to say. Sometimes I still think about that night at her apartment, how it felt like everything was falling into place. It's strange how a person can make you feel like you're part of something real while using you for something else entirely. Now, whenever I see profiles that look too perfect, with the same kind of casual captions or mysterious smiles, I just swipe left. Maybe I'm paranoid, but I've had enough of being someone's test. I met Eamon because my cousin wouldn't stop nagging me about how you'll never meet anyone if you don't put yourself out there. So one night, I finally gave in, sat in bed, and reinstalled Tinder like a fool. I promised myself I'd only swipe for 10 minutes tops. Of course, that 10 minutes turned into an hour, and somehow I matched with a guy named Eamon. His profile was simple, just 4 pictures and a short bio that said, "You'll either love me or wish you'd never met me." I thought that was kind of funny. His pictures were normal too. One at the beach, one with his dog, one at a rooftop bar, and one where he was clearly pretending not to notice the camera. He didn't look like he was trying too hard, and that alone made him stand out. He messaged me the next day, said he liked my hoodie in one of my photos, asked where it was from. We started talking from there. He had this relaxed, charming vibe, the kind of guy who seems like he always knows what to say, but doesn't overdo it. He said he worked in tech, but hated the corporate part of it, and that he liked meeting new people who don't bore him. It sounded cocky, but somehow it came off as confident instead. Our first date was at this bar that had live music and the best fries in town. He showed up early, wearing a plain white tee and black jeans, and he had this casual smile that made him seem harmless. The night was fun, lots of laughing, a couple of drinks, and easy conversation. He told me about his travels, about how he'd moved cities a few times, about his dog that apparently had more personality than most people. He made me feel like I was the only one in the room, the kind of attention that's dangerous because it feels so rare. We went out again the next week, then again the week after that. Each date felt like a highlight reel. He remembered small details about me, my favorite drink, the song I mentioned liking, the fact that I hated olives but loved olive bread, stuff that most people forget. He'd text me good morning, check in during the day, send memes at night. It all felt real. By the third date, I was starting to think maybe I'd actually gotten lucky for once. We were at a small Italian place he picked. Halfway through dinner, He leaned back and asked if I wanted to play a game. He said, "Let's see who's better at guessing secrets." I laughed because I thought he was just flirting, but he kept going. He said he'd start. Then, without warning, he said, "I'm dating someone you probably know." I froze, thinking he was joking, but he didn't laugh. He just smiled and said, "Relax, it's not what you think." I asked what that even meant, and he said he'd been seeing a few people who were somehow connected, friends, maybe even coworkers. He said it like he was talking about the weather. I thought he was messing with me, so I kind of laughed it off. But then he said, "I'm just curious to see who figures it out first." I stared at him, waiting for him to say he was kidding, but he didn't. He took a sip of his drink and just looked at me like it was a totally normal thing to say. I asked him if he was serious, and he nodded. He said he'd been testing the limits of honesty. That was his phrase. Apparently, he'd been dating multiple women who all somehow knew each other, some from work, some through mutual friends, and he wanted to see how long it would take before someone connected the dots. He said it was a social experiment in emotional awareness. I remember that exact phrase because it sounded so weird coming out of his mouth. I asked him if he realized how messed up that was, and he said, "Everyone plays games. I'm just being open about mine." That was it for me. I told him I wasn't interested in being part of whatever experiment he thought he was running. I left before finishing my food. But that's not where it ended. 2 days later, one of my friends sent me a screenshot from a group chat we were both in. It was a picture of E-Man, same face, same name, same profile, and a message from another girl saying, "Has anyone gone out with this guy?" My stomach dropped. I replied and said, "Yeah, why?" She said she'd been seeing him for a few weeks too. Then another girl in the chat said she had too. Turns out he really was dating multiple people from the same friend group. Not only that, he'd been scheduling us like appointments. Thursdays were my days. Fridays were hers. Saturdays were someone else's. We started comparing notes, and everything lined up. The same texts, the same compliments, even the same restaurants. He literally repeated the same lines to all of us. We decided to confront him together. Not in person, but through text. We made a group chat, added him, and sent him a screenshot of all our messages with him side by side. His reply, "Wow, I didn't think you'd find each other this fast." Like it was some kind of game he'd lost. One of the girls went off on him, calling him a manipulative jerk. Another just left the chat. I didn't even know what to say. I was angry, sure, but more than that, I was embarrassed. I'd fallen for someone who saw me as part of a puzzle, not a person. He didn't even apologize. He said something like, "I never lied. I just didn't tell you everything." Then he left the chat too. The next week, I found out he'd matched with someone new, a girl from another circle of friends we knew through Instagram. It was like he was expanding his experiment. I blocked him everywhere after that. Months later, someone told me he'd moved to another city. Apparently, he'd started doing the same thing there too. I guess some people just never stop playing games because they're scared of being bored. I think what messed with me the most wasn't even the cheating. It was the way he made everything sound like it had a purpose. Like he was learning something valuable from all of it. But really, he was just hiding behind big words to excuse being selfish. Now, when someone talks about being open-minded or experimenting with connections, I can't help but think of Eamon. That night in the restaurant, him saying it so casually like it was nothing. The way he smiled like it was clever instead of cruel. It's weird how someone can leave such a big mark on your brain for all the wrong reasons. I don't even think about him as an ex or someone I dated. He's more like this weird glitch in my timeline, something that shouldn't have happened but did. Every now and then, I still get messages from one of the girls he dated back then. We kind of became friends over the shared disaster. We joke about starting a support group called Eamon's Alumni. It's funny now in a sad kind of way. I don't know what he's doing now, and honestly, I don't care. But sometimes when I think about how small the world feels, I wonder if he's still out there somewhere, trying to see how many people he can play at once before the whole thing blows up again. I met Hershey on a random Tuesday when I was bored out of my mind at work. It was one of those days where nothing happens. Your brain's half asleep, and you keep checking your phone just for something to do. I'd been scrolling through Tinder like a zombie when her name popped up. Hershey. Not short for anything, just Hershey. I thought it was a joke at first, like maybe she was trolling people. But then I saw her pictures and changed my mind. She had this confident, almost bossy vibe in every photo. Big smile, bright eyes, sharp outfits. You could tell she knew she looked good, but not in an annoying way. Her bio said, "If you don't know what you want, don't swipe." It sounded like a warning, which for some reason made me more curious. We matched the same night. She messaged first, asking if I was a morning person or one of those stay up till 3 a.m. types. I told her I was the second one. She said good, because she hated people who texted good morning before 11. The way she said things always had this mix of humor and edge, like she was testing you but didn't want you to know it. We talked for a few days, and she seemed pretty cool. She said she worked in marketing, handled social media campaigns, and spent too much money on oat milk lattes. She had this way of making normal stuff sound interesting. We joke about bad Tinder bios, people who call themselves entrepreneurs but don't have jobs, and the whole weirdness of dating apps in general. Our first date was at a rooftop bar downtown. She picked the spot, said she liked places with a view and good lighting. When I got there, she was already at the bar, wearing a black leather jacket and holding a drink that looked too expensive for the place. She greeted me with a confident "hey" and a small smirk like she already knew the night would go her way. We sat by the railing, ordered drinks, and started talking. She was funny, like genuinely funny, not the forced quirky type. We talked about movies, work, random life stuff. She told me she wasn't really into the whole love story thing, that she found dating apps more interesting as data. I thought she was joking. She said people show you who they are faster online because they think there's no consequence. I said that sounded kind of depressing, and she laughed. Halfway through the night, I realized she hadn't asked much about me personally. She asked questions, but not the kind you ask because you care. It was more like she was collecting info. How long do you usually talk to someone before meeting? Do you use the same openers with everyone? How long do you stay on an app before deleting it? Stuff like that. I figured maybe she was just curious, or maybe she really liked talking about dating. The next morning, she texted me thanking me for the insight. I thought it was a weird way to put it, but I brushed it off. We went out again the next weekend. She wanted to try a new Thai place that had just opened. It was one of those trendy spots with neon signs and food that looked better than it tasted. She was different this time, more observant, less flirty. Every now and then, she'd pull out her phone and type something, saying she was checking messages from work. But I noticed she wasn't looking at emails. She was typing notes. By the third date, I started noticing patterns. She'd repeat specific phrases like she was running the same script on purpose. She'd ask me about my dating habits again, but in slightly different ways. She'd reference things I'd said before, like she was testing if my answers would change. It was strange, but she was still fun to hang out with, so I didn't overthink it. Then one night, she invited me over. She said she wanted to cook for me since I'd picked the last place. Her apartment was small but modern, filled with plants and those candles that smell like fancy hotels. Everything looked perfectly arranged like a magazine photo. While she was cooking, I noticed her laptop open on the counter. The screen was on some kind of spreadsheet. I didn't mean to snoop, but it was right there, and I couldn't help glancing. The top of the sheet said, Tinder Dataset 2025. My stomach dropped a little. Under that were columns labeled age, response time, opener, engagement level, outcome. And there were names, first names, cities, even short notes. I saw mine. It said, met 3 times, analytical, not easily influenced, curious but guarded. I stood there frozen, staring at my own name on this weird spreadsheet like I was part of some experiment. When she walked back in with 2 plates of food, she saw where I was looking. She didn't even flinch. She just said, "Oh, that," like I'd caught her checking her email. I asked her what it was, and she said, "Work." I said, "That's not work." She sighed and admitted it wasn't exactly her official job, but that she used dating apps to collect behavioral data for her company. She said it helped her team understand how people interact online so they could make better marketing campaigns. I asked if everyone she met knew she was doing that, and she said, if they knew, they'd act different. That ruins the data. I couldn't believe it. She'd literally been using real dates as research subjects. She said I shouldn't be mad because no one got hurt. She said it like it was obvious, like emotions didn't count as damage. I didn't even know what to say. I just grabbed my stuff and told her to have a nice life. She didn't stop me. Later that night, she texted me saying, "You'd be surprised how much you can learn when people think it's real." That one message made me feel gross in a way I can't explain. I blocked her after that. A few months later, someone from my office mentioned a marketing conference where this woman gave a presentation about data-driven romance, understanding consumer behavior through dating apps. I didn't have to ask who it was. They said her name was Kershey. I just sat there pretending not to care, but inside, I felt sick. She turned people's lives into a study. Every awkward first date, every flirty message, every ghosted conversation, it was all just numbers on her laptop. It's weird because in a way she wasn't lying when she said she didn't believe in online dating for love. She believed in it for something else entirely, information, and that's almost worse. Now, whenever someone asks me what my worst Tinder story is, I just say, the one where I got turned into marketing data. People usually laugh, thinking I'm joking, but I'm not. Sometimes I wonder if I'm still in her spreadsheet somewhere, buried under a bunch of other names. Maybe she still updates it, tracking how many times people message or how long they stay on the app. Maybe she uses my messages in a slideshow somewhere, showing a room full of strangers what kind of person I am. The thing that sticks with me isn't even the invasion of privacy. It's how normal she made it sound. Like what she was doing was just clever, not creepy. She said people give away more online than they ever realize, and she was just smart enough to notice. I deleted Tinder after that. Not out of heartbreak, but because I realized how exposed it all is. Every bio, every message. It's like we're all handing pieces of ourselves to strangers, hoping one of them won't weaponize it. There's no good way to explain this one without sounding like I made it up. Every time I've told someone about Bastion, they look at me like I'm joking or exaggerating. But I swear, it happened exactly like this. So, I met Bastion at a pizza place. Not on Tinder. At least, that's what I thought. I was there with a couple of coworkers, half drunk on cheap beer and talking way too loudly about how I was done with dating apps. Right after I said that, I got a Tinder notification. The irony wasn't lost on me. I opened it, and there he was, Bastion. His profile looked normal, almost boring, which is why I swiped right. He had 3 photos, one hiking, one sitting in a cafe, and one holding a dog that wasn't his. I found that out later. His bio said something dumb like, "If you don't laugh at bad puns, we won't get along." It was cheesy, but it made me laugh, and honestly, that was enough. We matched instantly, and he messaged me 5 minutes later. He asked me if I believed in coincidences. I said, only when they're funny. He said, then this one's going to make you laugh. He told me he'd seen me at the pizza place just now and that he'd swiped when he noticed I was only a few feet away. That should have been my first red flag, but at the time, it just seemed kind of bold. We talked for a couple of days after that, and he asked me out pretty quickly. He suggested dinner at this small restaurant that had outdoor seating and string lights, the kind of place where everyone looks like they're on a first date. When I showed up, he was already there. He looked better in person, a little scruffier, less polished than in his photos. He stood up when I walked over, gave me a small wave, and smiled like he already knew me. The weird part was how comfortable he seemed right away, like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. Dinner started normal enough. We talked about work, family, music. He told me he was a writer, kind of freelance, and that he liked observing people. He said that was how he came up with most of his ideas, by watching how people move through the world. I remember thinking that was an interesting way to put it. Then, about halfway through dinner, things took a turn. We were talking about random stuff when he said, "You probably don't remember me, do you?" At first, I thought he was joking. I laughed and said, no, this is literally our first date." But he just kept looking at me with this small, knowing smile. He said we'd met before, only not out here. That's when I started feeling weird. I asked him what he meant, and he said, "You used to come to group on Wednesdays." I had no idea what he was talking about. Then he said, "The anxiety group, at the community center." And my stomach dropped. I used to go to a therapy group like that a few months back. Small circle, maybe 8 people total. It was mostly quiet, with everyone just trying to talk about their stuff. I remembered a few faces, but not all the names, and I definitely didn't remember anyone named Bastion. But then he said his full name, and it hit me. He asterisk had asterisk been there, sitting across the room, mostly quiet, taking notes sometimes. I never really talked to him directly, but I remembered his face. I just stared at him, trying to figure out what he meant by bringing it up now. He said, "I recognized you right away when I saw your picture on Tinder. I thought it'd be interesting to see how you'd act in the wild." I froze. In the wild. He nodded like it was a totally normal thing to say. He said he'd been studying how people change outside of controlled settings. I guess in his mind, therapy sessions counted as controlled environments, and Tinder dates were fieldwork. He said he wanted to see how authentic people were when they didn't know they were being observed. I couldn't even speak. He started telling me about the first time he noticed me in group, how I'd always tap my fingers when I was anxious, how I never looked people in the eye when I talked about relationships. He described it in detail, like a scientist reading notes from a lab report. It was creepy as hell. I told him that wasn't okay, that he had no right to do that. He said it wasn't personal, it was just curiosity, like that made it any better. He kept insisting that he wasn't trying to invade my privacy, that he was just interested in human behavior. I stood up right then and told him I was leaving. He didn't try to stop me. He just said, "I'll send you the article when it's done." I didn't even answer. I just walked out, heart pounding so hard I could hear it. When I got home, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I went digging online trying to find out if he'd actually written anything, and I did. He had a blog, nothing big, but enough to show he wasn't kidding. There were posts about social interaction, attachment styles, real-world behavioral observation. One of the posts was about recognition and context switching, and I swear, it sounded like it was about me. He never used names, or the details were too specific. The group setting, the tapping fingers, the anxiety around dating. It was me. I sent him a message telling him to take it down. He replied a few hours later with, "Don't worry, I anonymize everything." That made me even more angry. I told him I didn't care if it was anonymous. It was still messed up. He didn't reply after that. A couple of weeks later, one of the girls from the therapy group messaged me out of the blue. She said she'd also matched with him on Tinder. That's when I realized I wasn't the only one. She said he'd done the same thing to her, recognized her, taken notes, used her behavior for his blog. She was furious. We decided to talk to the therapist who ran the group. The therapist said he couldn't give us details because of confidentiality, but he did say Bastian hadn't been coming for a while and had apparently told him he was moving on to independent research. That line still makes my skin crawl. I stopped going to group after that. Not because of him exactly, but because it made me feel watched. Like at any point, someone could be studying me without me realizing it. A few months later, I checked his blog again. He'd stopped posting. The last entry said something like, "You can only observe people so long before they stop being subjects and start being ghosts." Whatever that meant. Now, whenever I think about dating or therapy or even just casual conversations, I sometimes wonder if someone's out there taking notes, analyzing the way I talk, the way I move, the things I say without meaning to. It messes with your head once you've been on the wrong side of someone else's research. And the weirdest part, sometimes I still think about how calm he was that night, how sure of himself. Like he genuinely believed he wasn't doing anything wrong, like I was the strange one for being upset. Every time I tell this story, people say it sounds like a scene from a movie. I wish it was. At least then, I could walk out of the theater when it got too creepy. I met Safe on a Wednesday that was already going bad. My boss was in one of those moods where he emails every 5 minutes about things that don't matter. My lunch exploded in the microwave, and the bus home broke down halfway. I remember sitting there, sweaty and annoyed, thinking, what else could go wrong? Then I opened Tinder out of pure habit, and there she was. Her name was what caught my eye first. Sadie. Not a name you see every day. Her pictures were simple, nothing flashy. One of her sitting in a park reading, one of her cooking something in a bright kitchen, and one of her laughing with a coffee in her hand. Her bio said, "If you can't make me laugh, at least bring snacks." It sounded like something a normal person would write, not one of those corny lines that sound like they were stolen from a meme. We matched later that night. She messaged first, said she liked my dog in one of my pictures. We started talking about dogs, then movies, then random stuff. She had this chill, grounded vibe that made conversation easy. No weird energy, no trying too hard. She told me she worked part-time in marketing and helped her friend run a little boutique. I told her about my job, which she said sounded boring the nicest way possible. After a few days of talking, she suggested meeting up. She picked this little restaurant near the waterfront, one of those spots that's just quiet enough that you can actually hear each other. When I walked in, she was already there, wearing this light blue dress that made her look like she just stepped out of a summer daydream. She smiled when she saw me, and that was it. I was gone. Dinner went great. We talked about everything and nothing. She told me she loved old movies and hated mornings, that she wanted to live somewhere with more space one day, maybe by the coast. There was this calmness about her, like she figured out who she was and didn't need to prove anything. When we said goodnight, she gave me this small, almost shy smile, and I couldn't stop thinking about it all the way home. Over the next few weeks, we kept seeing each other. It was easy. Text in the morning, calls at night, weekend plans that didn't feel forced. I told my friends about her, and they said I sounded different, like I was actually happy. I even started thinking about where things could go, which I hadn't done in a long time. Then everything flipped. It started on a Saturday morning when my coworker Dan mentioned something weird. He'd seen a woman on my Instagram story from the night before and asked if I was dating her. I said yeah, and why. He looked uncomfortable for a second and said, "Man, she looks exactly like my buddy's wife." I laughed it off, said it couldn't be. But something about his face made me uneasy. He showed me a photo on his phone later that day. It was from his friend's Facebook, his friend's anniversary post. There she was. Same face, same hair, same everything. Only in the picture, she was wearing a ring. I told myself there had to be some mistake. Maybe she just looked similar. That night, when I saw her again, I couldn't stop thinking about it. We were watching a movie, and she was scrolling through her phone when I noticed the lock screen light up. It said, "Mark." My stomach sank. I didn't say anything that night, but I barely slept. The next day, I decided I needed to know for sure. I asked Dan for his buddy's name, looked him up, and found his profile. His wife's name was, Sadiv. Same smile, same eyes, same everything. I felt sick. I waited a day before saying anything. I texted her, asked if we could talk. She said sure and invited me over. When I got there, everything looked normal. She'd made coffee, music was playing, and she was acting like nothing was wrong. I sat down and just asked her straight up, was she married? She froze. For a long time, she didn't say anything. Then she nodded. I asked why she hadn't told me, and she said, "Because I wasn't supposed to be on there." That didn't make sense, so I asked again, and that's when she told me everything. Apparently her husband, Mark, had been acting suspicious for months. Late nights at work, secretive texts, that kind of thing. So she made a fake Tinder account under her real name just to see if he was on there. She said she wanted to catch him. Only, somewhere along the line, she'd matched with me instead. She said she didn't mean to keep talking, but then we clicked, and she couldn't stop. I just sat there, trying to process it. I asked if he ever found out, and she said no, not yet. She said she still lived with him, that he had no idea she'd been seeing someone else. It felt like my head was spinning. I'd been part of some trap that wasn't even about me. Every memory I had of us felt tainted. Every date, every conversation. I thought I was building something real, but I was just a piece in some revenge story. She started crying then, saying she didn't mean to hurt me, that it got out of hand. She said she actually liked me, that it had stopped being about her husband weeks ago. I didn't know if I believed her. I just felt empty. I left without saying much. She tried calling a few times afterward, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. The last text I got from her said, "He found out. It's over." I never replied. A few weeks later, I saw on Facebook that her husband had made a vague post about trust and betrayal. I don't know if she told him everything or just enough to make it seem like he was the only one who messed up. Either way, it wasn't my problem anymore. The whole thing messed with my head for a while. Not because I was heartbroken, but because of how fake everything had been without me knowing. I kept replaying the nights we spent together, trying to figure out which parts were real. Was the laughter real? The little looks across the table? Or was it all part of her cover? I deleted Tinder for a while after that. Not because I was mad at dating, but because I just needed to not think about people like puzzles I couldn't solve. I started spending more time offline, hanging out with friends, actually living a bit. Then one day months later, I got a random text from an unknown number. It just said, "Thank you for reminding me what honesty feels like." No name, no context. I knew it was her. I deleted it without replying. I don't hate her. I think she was broken in a way I can't even fully understand. But I also think I was stupid for believing something that seemed too easy. Sometimes when I think about her, I picture her in that kitchen making coffee like nothing was wrong. Calm, composed, pretending everything was normal while her whole life was built on lies. It's strange how people can live double lives so easily, how they can make you feel special while using you to fix something they broke themselves. I'll be real, Luke didn't even seem like my type when we matched. He looked too perfect. Not movie star perfect, just symmetrical in that weird way where you can tell a photo's been edited, even if you can't explain how do you know. Clean haircut, perfect lighting, no awkward angles, not a single blurry background. His bio said, experimenting with honesty, which I thought was just some hipster way of saying trying to be myself. Spoiler, it wasn't. He messaged me first. You look like someone who doesn't trust filters. I said, that's because I don't. He replied, good, neither do I. That was the first lie. We talked for a few days before deciding to meet. He seemed normal enough, funny, asked real questions, didn't do that thing where guys turn every topic into a flex. He said he was a graphic designer, which made sense since all his pictures looked like they belonged in a portfolio. I didn't think twice about it. Our first date was at this casual taco place near my work. He showed up early and texted me that he'd already grabbed us a table. When I walked in, I saw him right away. He was sitting by the window, smiling like we'd known each other for years. And yeah, he looked exactly like his pictures. Maybe even better. At first, I thought it was one of those rare times when someone actually looked like their profile. His voice was calm, smooth, and he had this way of holding eye contact that made you feel seen. We talked about music, travel, how neither of us could cook to save our lives. It was easy, comfortable. Then something small threw me off. The waiter came over to take our order, and when Luke smiled at him, his face did this thing. It didn't move naturally. Like the smile stopped half a second too early, almost like it was timed. It wasn't a big deal, but I noticed it. The waiter must have noticed too because he hesitated before walking away. Later, when Luke got up to go to the bathroom, I checked his Instagram again. The more I looked at his pictures, the weirder they seemed. They were all too consistent. Same lighting, same tone, same slight smirk. Every background looked like it was taken out of a commercial. Caves, beaches, city streets, but always with no people around. It started to feel uncanny. When he came back, I asked who took all his photos. He said he used a setup. I asked if he meant a tripod, and he said, something like that. He smiled again, but this time it didn't reach his eyes. We finished dinner, and he paid before I could even grab my wallet. He said, don't worry, this one's on the experiment. I laughed awkwardly and asked what that meant. He said, I'll tell you next time. The next few days we kept texting. He was charming but vague. Sometimes he'd say things that sounded rehearsed, like he'd copied and pasted them from somewhere. I told my friend about him, and she joked that he sounded like an AI boyfriend. I laughed, but it planted something in my head. On our second date, we met at a park. It was sunny, but not too warm. He wore the same jacket from his photos, the one that looked like it was made for an ad. We walked, talked, grabbed ice cream. Everything was normal until I noticed something on his phone when he showed me a picture of a place he wanted to visit. There was an app open in the background with a logo I didn't recognize. It had a symbol that looked like an eye with a circuit through it. When I asked what it was, he said it was a design program he was testing. I didn't believe him, but I didn't push it. Then came date 3. He invited me to his place for dinner. He said he'd cook, and even though I joked about not trusting a man who can actually cook, he said he wanted to surprise me. When I got there, the first thing I noticed was how clean everything was. Not normal clean, like stage clean. The kind of clean where nothing looks used. No dishes, no clutter, no personal stuff. The walls had one photo, a black and white picture of a street, but it looked printed from a stock image site. While he was in the kitchen, I walked around, trying not to snoop but still curious. I saw his laptop open on the counter. The screen was on a window labeled Render Progress. My stomach dropped. It had folders labeled Luke_model_V4 and Tinder_set. He walked back in just as I was staring at it. He didn't even look surprised. He said, so I guess now you know. I asked what the hell that meant. He said he used AI to create his Tinder profile. Every photo, every caption, every message generated. He said he built a model of the perfect dating persona using data from profiles across different cities. I asked what that made him, and he said, the person behind the code. I didn't understand. He explained that he'd used his real name but created an entirely fake version of himself online. AI-generated photos, responses guided by machine learning, even personality traits fine-tuned to get matches. When I asked if I was the only one he'd met in real life, he said no, but I was the only one who hadn't noticed yet. He said it like he was proud of it, like he'd accomplished something huge. He said he wanted to see how far a fake person could get before people started noticing. He said I'd been part of Phase 3 real-world testing. I didn't even know what to say. My brain was spinning. I told him it was messed up, that it was lying. He said, not really, it's still me, just optimized. I grabbed my bag and left. He didn't follow. He just stood there, calm, like he'd expected me to react that way. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The way his face seemed too perfect, how the smile felt a little too practiced, how his messages always hit the right emotional note. It all made sense now. I'd fallen for an algorithm. I tried searching him up again, but his Tinder was gone. His Instagram, too. It was like he deleted everything overnight. The only thing left was a LinkedIn profile that hadn't been updated in years. A week later, I got a message from an unknown email. The subject said, "Thank you for participating." Inside was a single line, "You were part of something real, even if I wasn't." I deleted it right away, but it stuck with me. Every now and then I'll scroll past some random TikTok or Reddit post about AI dating experiments, and I wonder if one of them is him. Maybe he's still out there, fine-tuning his digital self, testing how much people will believe. Maybe I was just one of dozens. It messes with your head, realizing how easy it is to fake a person. He learned my tone, my humor, my empathy, all through data, and I fell for it. Now, when someone messages me with the perfect reply, I hesitate before answering. I read their photos harder, looking for small flaws, reflections, mismatched shadows. I probably sound paranoid, but once you dated someone who built their own personality, trust hasn't come easy. Luke wasn't a scammer. He didn't want money or fame. He just wanted to prove something to himself, to the world. I just wish I'd known I was the test subject. I didn't even want to go on that date, to be honest. It was one of those times where you match with someone, keep putting off actually meeting, and then finally say yes because you don't want to seem like a flake. That was Jake. We'd been messaging for about a week, and he seemed cool enough, funny, polite, a little awkward in that way that makes someone seem genuine. He said he worked in media, which could mean literally anything, but I didn't ask too many questions. His profile didn't scream creep or red flag. 3 pictures, one of him in a record store, one on a hiking trail, one blurry one of him holding a cup of coffee. His bio said, "Just here to meet interesting people and hear good stories." That line stuck with me later for reasons you'll see. We agreed to meet at a diner. Not fancy, not trying too hard, just a small place that stayed open late and had decent pancakes. When I walked in, he was already there, sitting by the window looking at his phone. He looked up, smiled, and waved me over. He looked pretty much like his pictures. Same scruffy hair, same tired eyes, same easy smile. He was chill. We ordered food, talked about random things. He asked me about music, about work, about my worst day ever. That question felt a little too on the nose, but I answered anyway. I told him about a guy who once brought his mom to dinner because she was in the car already. Jake laughed so hard he almost spilled his drink. At first, everything was fine. The conversation flowed. There weren't any awkward silences, and he seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. He had this way of asking follow-up questions that made me feel like he was really listening. He didn't look at his phone much, except once or twice to check something. I didn't think much of it. About an hour in, I noticed a small microphone pin on the collar of his jacket. It wasn't super obvious, looked kind of like a lapel pin, but every once in a while, a tiny light blinked red. I thought maybe it was one of those health tracker things or a smart gadget. I didn't ask because I didn't want to sound paranoid. Then, while he was in the bathroom, his phone buzzed on the table. A message popped up from someone named Mod Team. It said, "Stream's running smooth. Chat's loving this one." I froze. At first, I thought it was some inside joke or maybe he was part of some podcast thing. But when he came back, he looked way too relaxed for someone with a message like that. I decided to test him. I leaned forward and asked, "So what kind of media do you work in?" He hesitated for half a second, then said, "Oh, just freelance stuff. Online content, mostly." That's when my stomach started sinking. I glanced down at his jacket again, at the blinking light. He noticed and adjusted it quickly, pretending to fix his sleeve. My brain was screaming at me that something was off. I excused myself to the bathroom, pulled out my phone, and searched his name. It didn't take long to find it. There it was, a Reddit thread called r/first date psychology. The top post that week, "Going on a live test tonight." Subject seems funny, curious to see how long until she notices. The photo attached to the post was my Tinder profile picture. I remember just staring at the screen, feeling my heart race. There were hundreds of comments, people making jokes, taking bets, analyzing what they thought my reactions would be based on my pictures. The caption said the stream had started 15 minutes ago. I went back to the table, my hand shaking. I didn't say anything right away. I just stared at him while he kept talking like nothing was happening. Then I said, "You're live right now, aren't you?" He froze. Then he smiled this awkward smile like he'd been caught doing something dumb but harmless. He said, "It's not what you think." I asked him what the hell it was then, and he said it was a social experiment. He said he'd been doing a series of live streams about first date behavior, body language, reactions, small talk patterns. He said people loved it, that it was educational and entertaining. I asked if I'd agreed to be part of it. He said no, but that it wasn't really invasive, since he didn't use real names. He said I should feel flattered because the audience thought I seemed cool. I think that was the exact moment I wanted to throw my drink in his face. I stood up, grabbed my bag, and walked straight out. He followed me outside, saying, "Hey, don't be mad. It's just content." I didn't even look back. I just kept walking until I hit the corner, then called my friend to pick me up because I was too shaky to drive. That night, I went back on Reddit to see if the post was still up. It was. The stream had ended, but the comments were still there. People were dissecting everything, what I wore, what I ordered, how often I smiled. There were timestamps and quotes. Someone even commented, "She caught on at 1:6:37, new record." I reported the post, and a bunch of my friends did too. It eventually got removed, but by then it had already been reposted on another platform. I saw myself in a short clip someone had uploaded labeled, "When your date figures out you're live." The comments made me want to throw up. I texted him once after that, just to ask why. Not because I wanted an apology, but because I genuinely couldn't understand what made someone think that was okay. He replied, "It's not that deep. People overshare all the time. I'm just showing reality." That was it for me. I blocked him on everything. A couple of weeks later, someone sent me a new thread from the same subreddit. It said, "Got banned again, lol. Back soon with new setup. Different username, same writing style." He was still doing it, probably with new people who had no idea they were being broadcast to strangers online. It made me realize how much we all trust people without even thinking. You meet someone, you assume it's just two people having dinner. You never imagine that somewhere, someone's recording it, streaming it, turning it into entertainment. The worst part wasn't even the embarrassment. It was how normal he made it sound, like I was the crazy one for not wanting to be part of his experiment. Now, when I go on dates, I look around first thing. I check for phones propped up on salt shakers, little blinking lights, weird jackets. It sounds paranoid, I know, but once you've been live streamed without knowing, you don't see things the same way again. It's been months since that night, but sometimes I still think about all the strangers who saw me before I even knew they existed. My face, my laugh, my reactions, all part of some faceless crowd's entertainment. And Jake, he probably moved on to another subject, probably smiling into another camera, pretending it's all harmless fun. The first thing I noticed about Olivia was her eyes. Not in a romantic way, just different. Her pictures had this look, like she was both posing and somewhere else entirely. Most girls on Tinder smiled the same smile, but hers did look practiced. It was softer, a bit sad maybe. Her bio was short, I like old movies, thunderstorms, and people who listen. I don't know why, but it hit different. Maybe because I was tired of everyone trying to sound funny or edgy. We matched late one night when I couldn't sleep. It was raining outside, and I remember just lying there, scrolling with the sound of water hitting the window. I messaged her something lame like, "You seem like the kind of person who watches movies with the subtitles on." She replied, "Only if they're good ones." That was the start of it. Our conversations were quiet but deep. She wasn't the type to send 10 texts in a row or flood me with emojis. Everything she said felt thoughtful. She told me she worked at a nonprofit, helped organize events, and that she was trying to get better at cooking. She also said she was an only child, but sometimes she felt like she wasn't. I didn't know what that meant, and she didn't explain it, so I just let it go. We decided to meet a few days later at a park cafe. It was a warm afternoon, everything kind of glowing in that late day light that makes even normal places look like paintings. She was already sitting at a table when I got there, wearing a long beige coat, even though it wasn't cold. She waved when she saw me, and when I sat down, she smiled like she'd been waiting. She was beautiful, but not in the loud way. More like she was made for black and white film. There was something peaceful about the way she spoke, slow, steady, like every word mattered. We talked for a while about work, random hobbies, favorite books. Then she asked if I'd ever lost someone close. It came out of nowhere, but she said it so calmly I didn't even find it weird. I said, "Yeah, my grandfather." She nodded like she understood something I hadn't said. After that, she opened up about her brother. She said he died when she was 17. Car crash. She said they were close, like twins who weren't actually twins. The way she talked about him was strange, though, like she still expected him to walk in the door one day. She said sometimes she could still hear him laughing when she was alone. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just listened. We kept seeing each other after that. She texted me random things, old photos of buildings, quotes from movies, a picture of her cat sitting on a windowsill. Every date felt slow in a good way, like we were both trying not to rush anything. But sometimes, in between all that, she'd get quiet. Not in an awkward way, more like she was somewhere else again. I'd ask if everything was okay, and she'd always say yes, just thinking about things. One night, after about a month, we were at her place watching an old movie she'd picked. The apartment looked like something out of another decade, books stacked everywhere, soft lamps instead of bright lights, framed photos on the walls. Halfway through the movie, she paused it and asked, "Do you think people can find comfort in repetition?" I didn't know what she meant, so I asked. She said, like, doing things that remind you of someone, even if they're gone. Then she looked at me, really looked, and said, "You remind me of my brother." I didn't know how to respond. I just froze, trying to process what she'd said. She smiled a little, like it wasn't a big deal. But then she added, "That's why I wanted to meet you. You look like him." It was like someone had pulled the floor out from under me. I asked if she meant that literally, and she nodded. She said when she first saw my profile, it felt like seeing a ghost. I didn't know whether to feel flattered or creeped out. She told me she'd been on Tinder for months, not really looking for love, but for something familiar. She said she'd matched with a few guys before me, but none of them felt right. "You do?" She said. "You move like him, talk like him." I didn't know what to say. The air in the room felt heavy, like the oxygen was gone. I asked if she realized how weird that sounded. She said yes, but that it wasn't weird to her. That being with me made her feel safe, calm, like he's still around somehow. That's when it clicked. Everything. The way she'd look at me like she was seeing someone else. The slow way she spoke, the quiet moments. She wasn't dating me because she liked me. She was trying to fill a hole. I left that night with a weird mix of sadness and discomfort. She didn't try to stop me. She just stood at the door, smiled softly, and said, "I'm glad I met you." I didn't talk to her for a few days after that. She texted me once, saying she hoped I was okay. I didn't respond right away. Part of me wanted to cut her off, but another part of me felt bad for her. She wasn't cruel or manipulative, just broken in this deep, quiet way. A week later, I finally agreed to meet again. We went for a walk near the lake, the weather starting to cool. She seemed lighter, like she'd made peace with something. We didn't talk about what she'd said before, but it was there, hanging between us. When we said goodbye, she hugged me tight and whispered, "Thank you for letting me remember him." That was the last time I saw her. She stopped texting after that, and I didn't reach out either. It felt like whatever she needed from me, she'd already gotten. A few months later, I got a message from a random number. It said, "You look so much like him today." No context. I guessed it was her, but when I replied asking if it was Olivia, the number was already disconnected. I don't know where she is now. Sometimes when I'm out, I think I see her just for a second. Maybe it's my imagination. Maybe it's guilt. Either way, I never walk up to check. The thing that gets me isn't that she used me. It's that she didn't even realize she was doing it. She wasn't trying to trick me. She was trying to fix something unfixable. Dating apps make people strange, I think. They turn grief and loneliness into profiles and bios, and sometimes those lines blur. I don't hate her for what she did, but I also don't think I'll ever forget. It's been a while now, and I've gone on a few dates since. Normal ones. But every time I see someone with eyes like hers, I get this weird chill. Not fear, exactly, just a reminder. Olivia didn't want love. She wanted to feel safe again, and maybe for a while I gave her that. I met Nina by accident, kind of. I'd been swiping half awake one night after a long shift, not even paying much attention, just mindlessly going right because my brain was too fried to care. The next morning, I woke up to a match notification and a message that said, "You look like someone who eats breakfast for dinner." That line cracked me up more than it should have. I checked her profile, and there she was, bright smile, messy hair, and the kind of eyes that made you think she laughed a lot. Her bio said, "Professional list maker, amateur everything else." I thought that was clever, and it ended up being truer than I realized. We started talking right away. She was one of those people who texted like she was in a constant good mood, every message full of random emojis and tiny details about her day. She told me about her cat, her plants, her weird love for true crime podcasts, and her hatred for mint chocolate. She made even boring stuff sound fun. We decided to meet for coffee after a few days. It was a Sunday afternoon, sunny but not too hot, the kind of day that made you want to be outside. She showed up 5 minutes early, holding an iced latte, and wearing these round glasses that made her look both nerdy and cute. She greeted me like we'd known each other forever. The date went smooth. We talked for hours, barely noticed time passing. She had this habit of making little notes on her phone every time something came up that she wanted to remember for later. I didn't think much of it. Some people are just note takers. She said she liked to keep track of funny things people said. I figured she was a writer or something. Over the next few weeks, we hung out a lot. Dinner here, a walk there, late night FaceTimes where she'd tell me about her day while brushing her teeth. It felt easy. She was the kind of person who made you want to open up without even realizing you were doing it. But every now and then she'd mention her spreadsheet. At first, I thought she meant work. She said she worked in marketing, so I assumed it was some analytics thing. One night, though, she said something that stuck out. We were sitting on her couch watching a movie, and out of nowhere, she said, "I think you're a solid 8. I laughed, thinking she meant looks. I asked, out of 10, and she said, "No, out of the 206. I paused. What? She smiled like she just said something normal. My spreadsheet. You're ranked 8th right now. I thought she was joking. I asked what she meant, and she explained super casually that she kept a private spreadsheet of every Tinder date she'd ever had. Every single one. She said it helped her stay objective. She showed me like it was no big deal. I leaned over and saw her laptop screen. There were columns, names, occupations, where they met, what they talked about, and a column labeled compatibility score. My name was right there, next to a bunch of others, with a number beside it. I didn't even know what to say. She said she started it as a joke years ago with her friends, but it turned into a personal project. She said it helped her track patterns and understand what she was really looking for. I told her that sounded kind of messed up, but she just shrugged and said, "Everyone collects data differently." I tried to laugh it off, but it got weirder. She said she read through her notes and noticed how guys reacted to certain topics. She had categories like emotional availability, sense of humor, and post-date follow-up time. She'd even written things like, "tends to deflect when asked about family," or "appears calm but avoids eye contact when serious." It was like she'd been studying me. After that night, I started seeing things differently. Every time she'd ask a deep question or jot something down in her phone, I'd wonder if I was just giving her data. It made me nervous, like I was on some kind of test I hadn't agreed to take. The next few dates felt off. I'd catch her glancing at her phone mid-conversation, probably adding a note. Once, she asked if I'd ever been cheated on. I said yeah, years ago, and she nodded thoughtfully, typing something right after. I asked what she was doing, and she said, logging reactions. I thought she was kidding again, but she wasn't. It got to the point where I couldn't relax around her anymore. I liked her, but I felt like a number in her weird love lab. Then one night, we went out for drinks, and she brought up another guy, someone she dated months ago. She said he used to rank second, but dropped after ghosting her. She laughed about it, but I felt this weird pit in my stomach. It hit me that I could easily become just another name on her list. I asked her if she ever stopped keeping score once she actually liked someone. She said, I haven't liked anyone enough yet. That's when I knew I wasn't going to stay around long enough to find out if she ever would. I didn't ghost her, though. I told her straight up that I couldn't handle being part of her system. She didn't seem mad. If anything, she looked disappointed, like she just lost a valuable subject. She said, you were one of the more self-aware ones. I'll give you that. That line stuck in my head for weeks. A few months later, I got a random message from her on Instagram. She said she'd updated the rankings and that I was still in the top 10. I didn't reply. I just blocked her. But the weird part is, sometimes I wonder about that spreadsheet. I picture it, rows and columns, all those names, all those notes. Guys who probably have no idea they're still sitting in her database somewhere. Maybe she still updates it after every date, sipping her coffee and typing little summaries about strangers who think they're getting to know her. And the thing is, she wasn't crazy. She was organized, smart, even funny. But something about her brain just worked differently. She didn't see relationships as messy and emotional. She saw them as measurable. It messed with me for a while. I started overthinking everything I said to people after that, like maybe everyone was keeping score in some way. Maybe not in a literal spreadsheet, but still keeping tabs, still ranking, still comparing. The last thing she ever posted before I blocked her completely was a story that said, data never lies. Just white text on a black screen. It was probably about work, but didn't matter. It summed her up perfectly. Sometimes when I think about her, I picture that moment on her couch. The glow of the laptop screen, my name on a spreadsheet, her smiling like she'd done something clever. And maybe she had, because even now, part of me still wonders what number I am now. I met Chris during one of those weird phases where I convinced myself to date more intentionally. You know, the kind of nonsense you tell yourself after a bad breakup, like you're about to start a TED talk about emotional growth. I wasn't really feeling it, but I told myself to give people a fair shot. That's how Chris happened. His profile wasn't flashy. Just a couple of photos, one of him with a camera slung around his neck, another sitting on some old wooden steps with a coffee cup. His bio said, I tell stories for a living. What's yours? Normally, I would have rolled my eyes at that, but it was better than Six Stone if that matters or looking for a partner in crime. So I swiped right. He messaged me a few minutes later. His first message was just, you have a really observant face. I remember staring at that for a second, wondering if it was supposed to be a compliment. I asked what that meant, and he said, you look like someone who notices things. I didn't really know how to reply, but something about it was intriguing. He wasn't flirty, he wasn't corny, just direct in this quiet, confident way. We talked for a couple of days. He said he was a journalist, that he worked freelance for a few publications, mostly writing human interest stories. I thought that was cool. He said he liked hearing people talk about their lives, that it gave him perspective. It sounded deep, but not fake deep, so I went with it. Our first date was at this bookstore cafe downtown, the kind of place that smells like coffee and old paper, where everyone's wearing glasses and pretending to work on novels they'll never finish. I showed up early, and when he walked in, I instantly recognized him. Tall, scruffy beard, dark jacket, messenger bag slung over one shoulder. He looked like every writer in a movie, but in a good way. He was easy to talk to. He listened more than he spoke, which I liked. He asked about my job, my family, what I did for fun. He had this calm energy, like nothing could surprise him. But what stood out most was how focused he was. When I talked, he really listened. Not just the polite kind of listening, but like he was memorizing every word. At the time, I thought it was a rare quality. We ended up staying there for almost 3 hours. I didn't even notice how late it was until the barista started cleaning up. When we said goodbye, he gave me this small smile and said, thanks for trusting me with your stories. I remember thinking that was an odd way to phrase it, but I brushed it off. We kept seeing each other after that. Coffee dates, dinner, long walks around the city. He was always asking questions about my childhood, my friendships, my past relationships. At first, it felt nice, like he was really trying to know me. But after a while, I noticed he rarely shared much about himself. Every time I asked something personal, he'd deflect with another question or say, "I'll tell you later." One night, we were at a bar near his place, and I noticed he had a small notebook with him. He kept it on the table next to his drink, flipping it open now and then. I teased him, asking if he was grading me. He smiled and said, "Just notes." That should have been a bigger red flag, but I thought maybe it was a writer thing. On our fourth date, he invited me to his apartment. He said he'd make dinner, and I was curious to see how he lived. When I got there, the place looked almost too clean, like it had been staged. No clutter, no personal photos, nothing that gave away much about him. He poured us wine, and we sat at the table eating pasta while he asked about my worst heartbreak. I told him, and he just nodded quietly, scribbling something in that same notebook. I laughed and said, "Are you seriously writing this down?" He looked up and said, "You never know what might inspire something." Something about the way he said it made my stomach twist. A few days later, I started feeling weird about everything. So I did something I almost never do. I Googled him. I typed his full name and added journalist to see what came up. And when I saw it, my stomach dropped. There it was, an article published just 2 days earlier. The title was "The New Rules of Manipulation, Dating Apps and the Human Game." The author, Chris. I clicked it. The piece started by describing a woman he'd met on a dating app. Everything was there. The cafe, the bookstore, the pasta, even the line about trusting me with your stories. Only he didn't use my name. He called me O, but every detail was unmistakable. He'd written about me. He wrote about how people perform authenticity, how dating apps have turned honesty into a strategy. He described my body language, my tone, the way I laughed at certain questions. He called me a case study in vulnerability. He even wrote, "She doesn't realize that I'm not dating her. I'm documenting her." I just sat there staring at the screen. My face went hot. I scrolled through the comments, people calling it brilliant, unflinching, bold. Nobody knew it was me. I texted him right away, "You wrote about me?" He replied almost instantly, "It's not about you. It's about a pattern." I said, "You could have asked." He said, "You would have changed how you acted if I did." That was it. No apology. No regret. Just logic. I blocked his number right after that, but it didn't stop me from checking the article again a few days later. It had blown up online, reposted, quoted, debated. People calling it the future of journalism. And there I was, a paragraph in someone else's career. For weeks after, I kept replaying every date in my head. Every question he asked, every time he nodded quietly while I talked. I realized I'd mistaken observation for connection. He wasn't getting to know me, he was collecting me. The part that stung the most was the ending of his article. He wrote, "The experiment ended when the subject stopped responding." Sometimes, even observation can become intrusion. Like I was some test he finished running. I don't use Tinder anymore. Not because of him exactly, but because that whole thing made me paranoid about what people really want when they ask you to open up. Sometimes I still think about messaging him again, just to ask if he ever felt bad. But I know he wouldn't. To him, I wasn't a person. I was a paragraph that got him attention. A few months later, a friend sent me another one of his articles. This one was about how empathy can be weaponized in storytelling. I didn't even click it. I didn't need to. I already knew who he was. I don't hate him. I think, in a weird way, he believed what he was doing mattered, that he was showing the world something important. But for me, all he showed was how easy it is to turn someone's life into content. And I guess that's the story I tell now when people ask about my worst date, the time I got published without knowing it. Jenna was the kind of match that made me double-check the profile to make sure it wasn't fake. You know how sometimes someone's pictures just look too good, like they were edited or taken by a professional photographer? That was her. Every photo looked like it belonged on a lifestyle blog. Soft lighting, perfect angles, That effortless kind of pretty that feels a little unreal. Her bio was short, said, "I'm not over my ex, but I'm trying." I should have taken that as a red flag right there, but of course I didn't. I thought it was honest. I thought, hey, at least she's self-aware. We matched on a Thursday night. She messaged me first, said something like, "You look like trouble in a hoodie." I laughed and said, "Depends on the hoodie." She told me she liked sarcasm and black coffee, and I told her that was a dangerous combo. Within a couple of hours, we were trading songs and memes. It felt easy fun. I hadn't had a conversation like that in a while. Our first date was at this little speakeasy-style bar she picked. Dim lights, loud enough that you could talk without feeling overheard, that kind of place. She walked in wearing this red dress that made half the room turn their heads. She smiled when she saw me and said, "Well, you look exactly like your pictures." Rare. I remember thinking she had this calm confidence, like she'd done this 100 times and knew exactly how to control the room. She ordered whiskey straight. I joked about how that made her cooler than me, and she said, "I like to feel the burn." I didn't realize how literal that was going to get. The night went great. We talked for hours. She told me about her job in PR, her dog, her obsession with baking, even though she said she was terrible at it. Everything about her felt magnetic. She looked at me like she saw right through me, and I liked that. When the check came, I reached for it, but she insisted on splitting. I liked that too. We went on a few more dates after that, and every time felt more intense. She'd text me late at night saying she couldn't sleep and wanted to hear my voice. She'd tell me random things about her day, like what kind of coffee she'd ordered or what her boss had said. It wasn't that she was oversharing, it was that she made you feel like you mattered to her. She had that talent. But every now and then, she'd say things that didn't quite fit. Like once, we were walking home after dinner, and she said, "You kind of remind me of him." I asked, "Who?" And she said, "My ex, but in a good way." I laughed it off, but something in her tone made me uneasy. Then she started talking about him more. Not constantly, but enough that I noticed. She said they dated for years, that he cheated, that she'd never really gotten closure. She told me she didn't hate him. She just wanted to understand. I told her I got that. Everyone's got someone they're still trying to make sense of. But something about the way she said it stuck with me. One night, maybe 3 weeks in, she invited me over. Her apartment was small but cozy. Candles everywhere, soft music, everything arranged perfectly. She poured us drinks, and we ended up on the couch talking about relationships. Again, she asked me what I'd do if someone hurt me like that, if I'd want revenge or forgiveness. I said forgiveness. She smirked and said, "You're better than me then." She told me she believed in balance, that everyone who hurt someone should feel that same hurt once, so they'd understand what they caused. I thought she was just venting, so I didn't take it too seriously. She leaned her head on my shoulder and said, "I think I like you because you remind me of him, but you're not him." That sentence stuck in my head for days. Over time, I noticed a pattern. Every time she got close to me, she'd suddenly pull away. She'd text less, act distant, then suddenly message again like nothing happened. It felt like being yanked back and forth. One day, I finally asked her what was going on. She said, "You didn't do anything wrong. I'm just trying not to ruin this." I didn't understand what that meant. The truth came out on a night that started off perfectly normal. We were at her place again, cooking dinner together. She made a joke about how terrible I was at chopping vegetables, and we were laughing when her phone rang. She glanced at it and froze. Then she declined the call fast. I caught a glimpse of the screen. It was a guy's name with a heart emoji next to it. I asked if that was her ex. She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "It doesn't matter." I said, "It kind of does." That's when she sighed, set down the knife, and said, "Okay, fine. Yes, but not the way you think." I asked what that meant, and she said, "He's the reason I'm on Tinder. I started dating people who reminded me of him. Not to get over him, to punish him." I just stared at her, trying to figure out what she meant. She said she'd been seeing people who looked or acted like her ex, same energy, same vibe, because it made her feel like she was in control again. She said, "It's like therapy, but real." I didn't even know what to say. I asked if she actually liked me, and she said, "Of course I like you, but that's part of it." That made my stomach drop. I asked if her ex knew, and she said no. It's not for him. It's for me. That was the last straw. I told her I couldn't be part of that it wasn't fair. She said, "You think like's fair?" He didn't ask before breaking me either. I remember her voice cracking when she said it, And suddenly I didn't feel angry anymore, just sad. She wasn't cruel. She was broken in this twisted way that made sense only to her. I left that night and didn't look back. She texted me once a week later saying she was sorry for using me as a reflection. I didn't respond. Months later, I saw her name pop up on Tinder again. Different pictures, same vibe. I didn't swipe, but I couldn't stop wondering if she was still doing the same thing, looking for people who reminded her of someone she couldn't let go of. Sometimes I think about her, and I wonder if she ever really wanted love or just wanted justice. Maybe both. Maybe she couldn't tell the difference anymore. She wasn't a bad person, just stuck in a loop she couldn't break, and I just happened to walk into it at the wrong time. If I ever read her name again somewhere, part of me would still want to know how she's doing. The smarter part of me knows I don't want to be another version of someone else's ghost. I met Mark during one of those random waves of boredom where you tell yourself you're not going to open Tinder again but end up doing it anyway. I wasn't even looking for anyone serious. I was just killing time between work and dinner. His profile didn't really stand out at first. Just 3 pictures. One of him at a concert, one hiking somewhere rocky, and one mirror selfie that looked way too casual to have been accidental. His bio said, "I'm curious about people." That's it. No jokes, no emojis, no red flags, just that. We matched the same night. His first message was, "You seem like someone who notices small things." It was such a random thing to say that I didn't even know how to reply, but I asked what he meant. He said, "You're smiling with your eyes, but not your mouth in your third photo." That usually means someone's confident but careful. It was weirdly specific, but also kind of interesting, like he actually paid attention. We talked for a few days, mostly about music and weird psychology stuff. He mentioned he liked studying how people behaved online, how they interacted, what they posted, what they hid. I thought it was just small talk, since a lot of people talk about social media like it's some big experiment. He said he worked in digital marketing, so I figured it was connected to his job. Our first date was at this rooftop cafe I had never been to before. The view was insane, and the sunset made everything look like a movie. He showed up 10 minutes early and texted me, "You're wearing the black jacket, right?" That kind of threw me off because I hadn't told him what I was wearing. He said he just guessed, but it was too accurate to be a coincidence. He was good looking in a quiet way, the kind of guy who doesn't try too hard but somehow still looks put together. He was polite, funny, and knew how to ask questions without making it feel like an interview. He had this calm confidence, like he'd already figured out what made people tick. We ended up talking for hours. He told me random stories about people he'd met through his work, about how everyone's online behavior reveals who they really are. I said that sounded kind of creepy, and he laughed. "Only if you look too hard," he said. At the end of the night, he walked me to my car. He said he had fun and that he'd like to see me again. He didn't try to kiss me or anything, just smiled, said goodnight, and left. It felt mature, which I liked. Over the next couple of weeks, we hung out a few more times. He was always interesting to talk to, always noticing little details about people. He'd say things like, "You always check your phone twice before putting it down," or "You pause before answering serious questions." It was almost unnerving how much he picked up on, but I told myself that maybe he was just observant. Then one night, while we were watching a movie at his place, he started talking about social media again. He asked me if I ever paid attention to who unfollowed me or stopped liking my posts. I said, "No, not really." He smiled and said, "That's rare. Most people pretend they don't care, but everyone does." I asked if he cared, and he said, "Not in the way you think. I like seeing how people react when I disappear." I thought he was joking, but he kept talking. He said he had this habit. He'd meet people online, follow them on Instagram or TikTok, get to know them, and then unfollow them out of nowhere. He said he liked to see if they'd notice. He'd watch if they'd text him, refollow him, or post something indirect about it. He said it told him how people process rejection. I laughed at first because it sounded ridiculous, like some weird prank, but the more he explained, the worse it sounded. He wasn't doing it as a joke. He was doing it on purpose. He said he liked the control it gave him. "Everyone wants to be noticed," he said. "When you stop giving someone attention, that's when you really see them." I asked if he'd ever done that to me. He smiled and said, "Not yet." That line stuck with me. After that night, things started to feel different. He was still sweet, still interesting. Every time he looked at me, I wondered if he was just watching for my reaction, waiting for some pattern to study. I noticed he'd sometimes go quiet while I was talking, like he was mentally taking notes. It made me feel like a bug under a microscope. Then one morning, I woke up and saw that he'd unfollowed me on Instagram. My first instinct was to think it was a glitch. Then I remembered what he'd said. I like seeing how people react when I disappear. I didn't text him. I told myself I wasn't going to play this game. But it ate at me all day. I checked my phone every hour, pretending I wasn't checking, wondering if he'd text first. He didn't. A day passed, then two. I caved on day 3. I texted, "Did I do something?" He replied 10 minutes later, "You noticed." That was it. 2 words. I just stared at the screen, realizing exactly what had happened. I'd become another one of his experiments. I blocked him after that. But a week later, he messaged me on another app. He said he'd be surprised how many people reach out after the unfollow. "You lasted longer than most," like it was some kind of compliment. I didn't reply. A month later, a friend of mine matched with him on Tinder. She sent me a screenshot asking if I knew him because she recognized him from one of my old posts. My stomach dropped. I told her to stay away, but she said he seemed nice. I didn't want to scare her, so I just said, "Be careful." 2 weeks later, she texted me, "You were right." He'd done the exact same thing to her. Followed her, flirted, then suddenly vanished. She said it made her feel crazy for caring. I told her that's exactly what he wanted. I don't know if he still does it. Maybe he moved on to someone else, another city, another set of people to test. Sometimes when I scroll through social media and see my followers go down by 1, I wonder if it's him again, checking to see if I'll react. It's strange how someone can make you paranoid about something so small. I used to think people who got upset about unfollows were being dramatic. Now I get it. It's not about losing a follower. It's about realizing someone's pulling strings just to see what you'll do. Mark once told me, "Everyone's predictable if you give them just enough attention first." That sentence still rattles around in my head sometimes. I don't think he was evil, just detached, like he couldn't tell the difference between curiosity and cruelty anymore. I haven't seen him in person since that last message, but sometimes I catch myself scrolling through my followers, checking names I don't even care about, wondering if I'm being watched. It's messed up, but part of me almost hopes he sees that. Maybe he'll add it to his mental list, another reaction for his invisible collection. I met Tara because I was bored on a Sunday afternoon and didn't feel like cleaning my apartment. I was sitting on the couch, eating leftover pizza, and swiping without really thinking. Her profile popped up, and the first thing I noticed was her smile. It wasn't perfect, but it looked real. Her bio said, "Not everyone deserves honesty right away." At the time, I thought it was a joke. Later, I found out it wasn't. Her pictures made her look like she had her life together. She had one hiking with friends, one holding a drink at a rooftop bar, and one with a dog wearing sunglasses. I swiped right mostly because of the dog. When we matched, she sent the first message. "You look like you'd argue about pineapple on pizza." I told her I'd die on that hill, and she replied, "Then maybe you're worth meeting." We talked for a few days before we met. She was funny, quick, and not too serious. She said she worked in education, that she loved road trips, and that she hated small talk. She was easy to text with. Some people make you feel like you're pulling teeth just to have a conversation, but not her. She was confident, but not cocky. Our first date was at this taco spot near downtown. She showed up wearing this bright green jacket that somehow worked perfectly on her, even though most people would have looked ridiculous. She had that kind of energy that fills a room without being loud. We ordered tacos and margaritas and ended up talking for almost 3 hours. It didn't even feel like a date. It felt like I'd known her for a while. After that, we started seeing each other regularly. It was easy, effortless. We'd meet for dinner, go for long walks, sometimes just hang out at my place and watch random movies. She always said she liked how comfortable it felt between us, like we didn't have to pretend. I liked that too. But she had this weird habit. She'd sometimes talk about her people like it was a plural thing, even when it didn't make sense. Like she'd say, "My people are busy this week," or "I promised my people I'd be around Saturday." I figured she meant friends or family. Then one night she mentioned something that didn't sound like a joke. We were sitting on my couch, half watching some cooking show, and she said, It's funny how honesty means different things to different people. I asked what she meant, and she said, like, if I told you everything right away, you'd probably run. But if I wait a bit, you'll be used to me first. I laughed, thinking she was messing around, but she just smiled and said, see, you already think I'm joking. About a month in, we were getting close. Close enough that I'd started telling my friends about her. They liked her instantly when I showed them pictures. She just had that charm. So when she texted me one night saying she wanted to tell me something important but not scary, I figured maybe it was about her past or her job. We met at her place this time. It was small, cozy, smelled like vanilla and candles. She made pasta, and we were eating on the floor because she said she didn't trust her dining table. It looked too responsible. Everything felt normal until after dinner, when she leaned back and said, okay, so I need to be honest about something. I said, all right, thinking it was something minor. Then she said, I'm polyamorous. I froze for a second, not because I didn't know what that meant, but because it came out of nowhere. She'd never mentioned other people, never hinted at it. I asked what she meant exactly, and she said, I date multiple people at the same time, but everyone knows about everyone. Except apparently I didn't. I asked why she didn't tell me earlier, and she said, because I like to see how people handle honesty. Most can't. She said she usually waited until the third or fourth date to say it, but with me, she wanted to wait longer. You seemed genuine, she said. I wanted to see how that would look if you didn't know the whole story. That made my chest tighten. It wasn't even about what she was saying. It was that she'd been testing me without telling me. She wasn't wrong about me being genuine. I just didn't like being turned into an experiment. I asked how many people she was seeing. She said 2 others. One guy she'd been with for almost a year, and another she'd started dating a few months ago. She said it was all open and ethical. I didn't feel like it was very ethical when I was the one who didn't know. I told her I wasn't sure how to feel about it. She said that was fine, that she didn't expect me to understand right away. It's not about replacing anyone, she said. It's about connection. I remember staring at the floor, trying to process it all. The weird part was, she didn't look nervous or guilty. She looked calm, like she'd practiced this speech before. I left not long after that. She hugged me at the door and said, take your time. Don't make a decision based on what you think you should feel. Make it based on what you actually feel. For the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I wasn't angry exactly, just confused. I kept asking myself if it would have mattered if she told me earlier. Maybe it would have saved me from getting attached. Or maybe it still ended up in the same spot, liking her, but feeling like I wasn't enough. She texted me a few times after that, just checking in, keeping it casual. Hope you're good. Saw a meme that reminded me of you. You're still one of my favorite people. Stuff like that. It made it harder to stay mad. A week later, I told her I couldn't do it. I said I wasn't built for sharing someone. She didn't argue. She just said, that's fair. I didn't think you'd stay, but I'm glad you met me anyway. And the thing is, I kind of was too. Because for all the confusion and weirdness, she wasn't fake. She didn't lie about how she lived. She just delayed the truth. In her mind, that wasn't deception, it was strategy. And maybe that's how she made it make sense for herself. A few months later, I read her name online again. Someone I follow had posted a picture from a small local music festival, and there she was in the background holding someone's hand and laughing. She looked happy. Not complicated, not testing anyone, just happy. Sometimes I think about what she said that night, about honesty meaning different things to different people. I still don't agree with her, but I get it now. She wasn't playing a game. She just lived by rules most people wouldn't understand. And even though I was just one chapter in her rotating story, I don't regret meeting her. She made me realize that not everyone's love looks the same, and that sometimes people tell the truth too late, not because they're lying, but because they want to be liked first. I didn't recognize Ryan's name at first. His profile picture was just him smiling with sunglasses on, holding a coffee, standing in front of what looked like a school building. He had one of those faces that felt familiar but not enough to place. His bio said, I make bad jokes and worse decisions. I laughed at that and figured, why not? When we matched, he messaged me something dumb but funny. On a scale from 1 to Wi-Fi, how strong is our connection? It was lame, but it worked. He had his easy confidence about him in messages, never overdoing it but always keeping the conversation moving. He said he was a teacher, taught history at a local high school, and loved his job most days except for when kids asked if the Cold War was actually cold. I thought that was funny, and it made him seem harmless. We talked for about a week before we met up. He suggested a cozy little restaurant that served comfort food, mac and cheese, chicken sandwiches, that kind of stuff. I liked that it wasn't some fancy place. When I walked in, he was already there, waiting from a corner booth. He looked the same as his pictures, except a little more relaxed. His voice was warm, calm, the kind of voice that makes you want to listen. Dinner went great. He asked a lot of questions, but not in an invasive way. He wanted to know about my work, my hobbies, what kind of music I liked, what I did for fun as a kid. He told me he loved teaching because teenagers are honest without needing to be. He said he liked watching how people grow up. That part sounded a little weird, but I brushed it off as teacher talk. We stayed at the restaurant until it closed, then walked around the block for a bit. He was easy to be around. He didn't rush anything, didn't make it awkward. When he dropped me off at my car, he said, "You're even better in person." I smiled like an idiot. For the next couple of weeks, we kept seeing each other. Movie nights, dinners, long walks. He'd text me every morning before school, little things like, "Wish me luck. I've got a class full of freshmen and no coffee." I liked it. It felt simple and nice. Then one night, while we were at his place watching a movie, he said something that stopped me cold. We were halfway through a comedy, eating popcorn, when he suddenly turned to me and said, "You probably think this is weird, but I already knew who you were before we matched." I laughed because I thought he was kidding. He didn't laugh back. He said, "I didn't mean it in a creepy way. It's just, I teach your brother." At first, I didn't understand what he meant. Then it clicked. My younger brother, Ethan, he went to a high school a few towns over. I asked which school Ryan worked at, and when he said the name, my stomach dropped. That was Ethan's school. I asked what he meant by teach, and he said he was his history teacher. He'd known the whole time. I didn't know what to say. I just sat there staring at him, popcorn halfway to my mouth. He said he recognized me the moment he saw my profile. Apparently, my brother had mentioned me once in class, something about how I'd helped him move into college housing last year. Ryan said when he saw my photo on Tinder, he thought it was a funny coincidence at first, but then he decided to see what would happen if he matched. I felt my skin crawl. He said he wasn't doing anything wrong, that we were both adults, that it was just curiosity. I asked why he didn't tell me right away, and he said, "Because I wanted to see how you'd act if you didn't know who I was." That lie made me feel sick. He started explaining how he'd been curious about how people behaved outside of context. He said in school, everyone's guarded, playing a role. He wanted to see what I was like in the wild. He said it like he'd been observing me, not dating me. I told him it was messed up, that he should have told me from the start. He said I didn't think it mattered. "You're not my student." That made me even angrier. It wasn't just about the age difference or the weird connection to my brother. It was about the fact that he'd known something huge and kept it from me on purpose. I left his place that night without finishing the movie. He texted me the next morning saying, "I didn't mean to freak you out. I just wanted to understand you better, like I was some puzzle he'd been studying." I told Ethan about it later, just to get it off my chest. He looked horrified. He said Ram was one of his favorite teachers, that he'd always seemed cool and chill. I told him to just keep his distance. I didn't want to blow it up into something public, but I wanted my brother to be aware. Ryan tried reaching out a few more times after that. He said things like, "You're overreacting, and it's not like I used your brother to find you." But I couldn't get past the fact that he'd sat across from me for weeks pretending everything was normal while knowing exactly who I was. It made every conversation feel tainted. Eventually, I blocked him. A few weeks later, Ethan told me that Ryan had mentioned taking a break from teaching for a bit. I don't know if it had anything to do with me or not, but I was glad he'd be gone. The whole thing left me weirdly paranoid. Every time I meet someone new now, I ask too many questions: where they work, what circles they're in, who they might know. I can't help it. The idea that someone could already know parts of your life without you knowing theirs, it gets under your skin. Looking back, I don't even think Ryan meant to hurt me. I think he was just the kind of person who saw people as case studies instead of actual humans. He liked watching, analyzing, understanding, but never connecting. He said once that teaching made him feel like he was on the edge of a story that keeps rewriting itself. I guess he thought dating me was part of that story. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if he just told me right away. Maybe I would have laughed about it, made a joke, and we'd have moved on. Or maybe I'd have walked away before any of it started. Either way, at least it would have been honest. But he didn't want honesty. He wanted observation. He wanted to see who I was before I knew who he was. And that's the part that still creeps me out the most. Every time I drive past that school now, I think about how he probably walks those halls, smiling like nothing ever happened, surrounded by people who have no idea how weirdly he blurs the line between curiosity and manipulation. It's strange how someone can look so normal and still make you feel like you've been studied instead of seen. I wasn't even supposed to be on Tinder that week. I deleted it months before, swore I was done with dating apps after one too many weird matches, but boredom always wins. One night, after scrolling through YouTube and eating leftover Chinese food straight from the box, I re-downloaded it. I told myself it was just to see what's out there, but we all know what that means. That's how I came across Amber. Her profile was simple. No quotes, no long bios, no filters. Just a few pictures of her out with friends, one at a concert, and one where she was wearing a leather jacket, smirking like she knew a secret. Her bio said, "I like chaos, good playlists, and proving points." That should have been my warning, but instead I thought it was kind of badass. We matched the same night. She messaged first, "Tell me one thing you've never told anyone on here." I said that I'm tired of trying to sound interesting. She replied, "Good, me too." Her texts were sharp and funny, but not over the top. She had this way of saying things that felt like dares. We talked for 3 days straight, mostly at night. She worked in marketing, said her job was mostly lying in clever ways. She told me she'd just gotten out of something serious and wasn't sure what she wanted yet. I told her that was fine. I wasn't exactly sure either. Our first date was at a small dive bar, the kind that plays old music and smells like spilled beer and nostalgia. She showed up wearing all black, hair pulled back, red lipstick. When she walked in, everyone looked. She had that kind of presence. She sat down, ordered a whiskey neat, and smiled like she'd been doing this her whole life. "So," she said, "what kind of person do you think I am?" I said she looked like someone who wins arguments on purpose. She laughed and said, "Close enough." The night was great. We talked about music, work, and the ridiculousness of modern dating. She said dating apps felt like digital gambling. You swiped, you hope, and most of the time you lose. She said she liked testing people. I asked what that meant, and she said, "You learn more from reactions than confessions." I should caught on right there. We started hanging out more after that. She texted me late, like 11 or midnight, asking if I wanted to grab drinks or just talk. Every conversation felt like a game of tug of war. She'd say something deep, then switch to a joke before I could respond. It kept me hooked, even when I knew something about her didn't quite add up. She never talked about her past relationships much, except to say, "People are loyal until they're not." When I asked if she'd been cheated on, she said something like that. One night, maybe our fourth date, she invited me over to her place. She lived in a small apartment downtown. Minimalist, clean, lots of candles. There were Polaroids pinned on a corkboard in the corner, mostly of her and random people. When I asked who they were, she said, "Just lessons." We ordered takeout and sat on the floor eating noodles straight from the containers. She asked if I'd ever cheated. I said no. She smiled like she was testing me and said, "Would you?" I said, "Of course not." She said, "Everyone says that until they get bored." The way she said it gave me chills. After that, things got strange. She'd go quiet for days and suddenly message me like nothing happened. One night she texted, "Do you think loyalty is real?" I said yes, and she said, "Then prove it." When I asked what she meant, she didn't reply. A few days later, she invited me to a party, said it'd be fun. It was at some friend's apartment downtown. When I got there, she was already talking to some guy, tall, confident, clearly into her. She saw me, smiled, waved me over, and introduced us. "This is Jared," she said. "He has a girlfriend too." The way she said that made my stomach drop. I didn't know what she meant until I saw the smirk on her face. It wasn't a friendly introduction, it was a test. She wanted to see how I'd react. The rest of the night was uncomfortable. She flirted with him openly, laughing too loud at his jokes, touching his arm. When she caught me looking, she said, "Relax, I'm just observing." I left early, texting her later that it wasn't cool. She didn't respond until the next day. "You passed," she wrote. I asked, "Passed what?" And she said, "The temptation test." That's when everything clicked. She told me before she liked proving points. Now I understood what that meant. She admitted she only matched with men who were in relationships or who she thought might cheat, just to see if loyalty still existed. She said she didn't trust people who claimed to be good. She liked to test if they actually were. I said, "So what was I then? Another experiment?" She said, "No, you were the control group." I didn't even know what to say. I felt angry, but more than that, I felt stupid. She said she didn't see it as manipulation, just truth extraction. She said most people fail the test. Men say they're loyal, but curiosity always wins, she told me. I just prove it. I left right after that. For a while, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I wasn't heartbroken. I didn't even know her that long. But the idea of being someone's social experiment messed with my head. It made me start questioning everything I said or did on dates. Was I being real? Or was I performing honesty like everyone else? A few weeks later, I saw one of her photos pop up again on Tinder. Same smirk, same energy. I didn't swipe this time. But curiosity got the better of me, so I looked up her name on social media. She had a private account, but her bio said, "Loyalty is just marketing." That line hit harder than I wanted it to. Now, every time someone brings up the topic of loyalty or cheating, I think about her. I think about how calm she was when she explained her tests, how proud she seemed of catching people lying to themselves. I guess in her mind, she wasn't doing anything wrong. She was just revealing who people really were. But still, she left me with this weird sense of paranoia. Like no matter how honest I am, someone's always waiting to prove me wrong. The last message she ever sent me said, "Thanks for being decent. They're rare." I didn't reply. Sometimes I still wonder what kind of person becomes that cynical. Someone must have broken her in a way that made her turn every date into an investigation. I don't hate her, but I don't think I could ever meet someone like her again without keeping one eye open. She once told me, "Trust is the easiest thing to fake." And the messed up part is, I think she's right. Matt showed up in my matches during one of those random nights where I couldn't sleep and decided to scroll through Tinder just to pass time. I wasn't even looking for anything. I was just lying there in the dark, swiping left on a bunch of gym guys and mirror selfies until his profile popped up. He had that kind of face that wasn't instantly hot but still made you stop and look twice. A half smile, kind eyes, and a short bio that said, "Voice messages greater than small talk." I didn't think much of it until he actually sent me one. A voice message. Most people don't even bother sending those, but he did. Just a short one, maybe 5 seconds long. He said, "Hey, I liked your profile. You sound fun." His voice was deep and calm, with this laid-back tone that made it sound like he wasn't even trying. I remember replaying it once before replying. We talked for about a week before meeting up. His texts were funny, a little flirty, but not annoying. He'd mix in more of those voice messages now and then, jokes, random thoughts, little goodnight notes. I kind of liked it. It made things feel more personal. When we finally made plans, he suggested this chill cafe near the park, and I said yes. When I saw him in person, he looked exactly like his pictures. Maybe even better. Tall, dark hair, that same easy smile. The date went smoothly. Good conversation. Easy laughs, nothing awkward. He told me about his job in real estate, said he liked it because it was half sales, half people watching. He talked about how people act when they want something, how you can tell who's lying by what they don't say. He said he liked figuring people out. I didn't think much of that comment at the time. We hung out again that weekend. Then again the next week. He was consistent, which I liked. No ghosting, no disappearing acts. Just chill, solid energy. He sent me voice messages almost every day. Sometimes it'd be something funny he saw, sometimes just a random thought. It felt nice, like he was actually making an effort. Then one night, my best friend texted me something weird. She said, "Hey, not to be weird, but I think I matched with your guy." I laughed and said, "What? No way." She sent me a screenshot. And there he was. Same name, same face, same bio. At first, I thought maybe it was an old account he hadn't deleted. I asked her to show me their messages. She sent a few screenshots. and my heart dropped. He'd sent her the same voice messages, word for word. The same lines, same tone, same little laugh at the end. It was identical. He even used the same, "Hey, I liked your profile. You sound fun," line that he'd sent me that first night. I didn't even know how to process it. I didn't tell them right away. I wanted to see if he'd slip up on his own. So I kept talking to him like nothing was wrong. I wanted to see if he'd mention her or act differently. He didn't. If anything, he was even more attentive that week. Then my friend told me he'd sent her another voice message, this time a longer one, where he talked about his terrible cooking skills and asked if she liked Italian food. That's when I snapped, because he'd sent me the same exact message 3 days earlier. It wasn't just that he was talking to someone else. It was that he was recycling everything. His voice, his words, even his tone. It felt fake in a way that hit deeper than normal flirting. I confronted him over text. I said, "Hey, small question. How many girls are getting your voice notes?" He replied with, "What do you mean?" I said, "You sent my best friend the same ones. Literally the same sentences." It took him a while to answer. Then he said, "You're overreacting. It's just flirting." That made me angrier. I told him it wasn't flirting. It was lazy and creepy. He said he didn't see what the big deal was, that he was just keeping conversations going, and that everyone reuses lines sometimes. But it wasn't just lines. It was his voice. He made something sound personal, something that felt like connection, and turned it into a copy-paste trick. I told him we were done. He said, "You're taking this too seriously." And then, "Don't act like you're the only one I talk to." That line stuck with me. My best friend blocked him right after I did. A week later, she sent me another screenshot. He popped up again. Same profile, same bio, same stupid smirk, but with a different name. She unmatched right away. It messed with me for a while. Not because I was heartbroken or anything. It was more about how fake everything suddenly felt. Every word he'd said to me had been said before, probably to a dozen other girls. All those late-night voice notes I'd replayed thinking they meant something. Just templates. Pre-recorded charm. A few weeks later, I got curious and checked Tinder again. He was still there, still using the same photos. I made a fake profile just to see if he'd match again. He did, instantly. I waited a few hours and sure enough, I got a voice message. "Hey, I liked your profile. You sound fun." Same one. I don't know how many people he'd sent it to, but I realized that was kind of his whole thing. He built a system out of it, automated attention. It wasn't about connection. It was about control. He liked seeing who'd respond, who'd fall for the same charm, who'd react first. It made me think about how easy it is to fake effort, how people will believe something's real if it just sounds real enough. After that, I deleted Tinder again. Not in a dramatic way, just quietly. I needed a break from pretending people were honest when half of them were performing. Sometimes I still think about those voice notes, though. The first one especially. How warm it sounded, how natural. I wonder how many people had that same message saved somewhere on their phone, thinking it was special. The last time I checked, his profile was gone. Maybe he finally got bored, or maybe he just moved to another app, starting over with the same words. Either way, I'm done listening.